Well, good morning, and thank you for joining the webinar for U.S. advisors of BHEARD students. I'm delighted that you are here, and I want to give a special welcome to the students that just arrived in the U.S. For the start of their program this August. My name is Fred Dirksen, and I'm the co-director of the BHEARD program. And with me today here are Ann Schneller, who's also a co-director, and Catherine Greenhalgh, who is the placement coordinator. The purpose of the meeting is to give you some background on the BHEARD program, talk about objectives, funding. We'll talk a little bit about participating countries, the features of the program. We'll talk a little bit about student stipends and the importance of returning home with relevant research experience. The advising arrangements are a little different, so we'll spend a little time on those and give you a timeline for PhD training in this program. The research proposal and budget processes are important, so we'll discuss those, as are professional training for BHEARD scholars. And as well, I'll point out later on, BHEARD scholars will often become leaders in their country, and in addition to research training, we would like to make sure that they receive professional training also. Now that we have some experience with the program, we will talk about early steps for student success, development of an individual development plan. We'll talk a little bit about our new student database system. And then finally, we want to hear from you how the BHEARD program can be improved. And we'll do that in part by a survey of participants. First, the BHEARD program background. BHEARD started in October of 2012. MSU was selected as the management entity by USAID, APLU, and CIMID. In the first cohort, we had 24 PhDs and 6 master's students in 10 US universities. And this first cohort started in August of 2013. Fast forward a few years, as of August 2015, a total of 77 PhDs and 60 MS BHEARD scholars in 30 US and African universities are in place, and so you've seen an exponential growth in the program. Study areas are really any area in agriculture, ranging from agricultural economics, agribusiness, plant breeding, crop and soil science, agronomy, molecular biology and bioinformatics, food science, post-harvest technology, nutrition, fisheries, and ag communication. And so really any area of study within agriculture is covered in our program. The website is listed here, and more information on the program can be found at this website. The objectives of the BHEARD program are to increase the number of agricultural researchers trained at MS and PhD levels, and strengthening scientific institutions in developing countries. And so this is really important. We want to strengthen scientific institutions in developing countries through increasing the numbers of agricultural researchers. The program supports Feed the Future, which is a USAID program that supports developing countries. We also want to create links between scientific and higher education communities in Feed the Future countries and in the US, and this is very important. There are several features of the program that supports this creation of linkages. Also an important objective of the program is enhancing gender balance in agricultural research institutions in developing countries. And of course, we have other ways of human institutional capacity building activities that can be included in the program also. The program is funded by USAID Bureau of Food Security, Office of Agricultural Research and Policy through CIMID. So this is the Central Washington Bureau of Food Security, and then the USAID missions in participating countries. The BHEARD management team consists of Ann Schneller, myself, and Eric Crawford as co-directors. We have a student placement office that has in it Catherine Greenhalgh, Paul Wozniak, and Caroline Fredline. A finance office that has Brooke Gallagher, Teresa Doer, and Mitch Miley, and Communications Manager Mark Meyer. Initially, the program started in 4 countries. Now we're working in 11 countries, and they're listed here, 2 in Southeast Asia, Bangladesh and Cambodia, the rest in Sub-Saharan Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Liberia, Malawi, Mali, Mozambique, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Uganda. So we have students in a number of universities from all of these countries. The BHEARD program is very comprehensive. It includes funding for most any expenses that students might have, and they include testing and visa application fees. They're covered. Travel to the US and back home, allowances, settling in allowances, books, lab fees, laptops, printing and binding theses, return baggage, also tuitions and fees and stipends. I'll talk about stipends a little bit in a bit more detail. A pre-dissertation trip home for PhD students, and again, we'll talk about that in more detail. I told you earlier about the idea of creating linkages between US institutions and target institutions in developing countries. And one of the ways to do that is for travel of US advisors to visit students in their home country when they're doing their research, not only to help the students, but also to help build relationships between institutions. There's a thesis research seed grant and a post-degree research grant that allows students to, once they've graduated, to get going on research in their home institution. And the degree is granted by the US university. Student stipends. During the time in the US, the first 3 years of the PhD program, student US stipends are determined by US universities and departments. And this is important because this has created some confusion in the past. BHEARD doesn't determine these stipends. These stipends are determined by the US universities and departments, and they vary between universities and departments. So even at Michigan State University, for example, different departments have different stipends for their students, and so BHEARD students will receive the same stipends as other students in their respective departments. USAID minimums apply, and all of the stipends that students receive are well above the USAID minimum. Home institutions continue to pay normal study leave allowances for those students that have employment at their home institutions and are on study leave. Now, during the final year of the program, the research is conducted in country, and during this research phase in country, the home institution continues to pay normal study leave allowances. Some of our students are currently not employed by their home institution, and BHEARD will provide a stipend determined in consultation with the USAID country mission. So we'll make sure that all students will have a reasonable stipend while they are in country doing their research. It is very important to us that students return home for their work and have with them training in research that's relevant to the country. So we have several features in place to make sure that this happens. First, students have a J-1 visa that does not allow them to return once they leave the US to do their research in country. Students are on study leave and sign a bond, so those students that are employed by their home institutions have signed a bond and are on study leave. Research is conducted in country, and this is very important. The research has to be relevant to the country, and so to ensure that, in part, we will insist that the research is conducted in country. Also, thesis defense is conducted in country by use of video conferencing. And again, this ensures that the students is already at home when they receive their degree. We have a provision that the US advisor travels to the home country to help with thesis research and establish links. And again, this is really very critical, as one of the objectives of the program is to make sure that linkages develop between US institutions and home country institutions. To make sure that students are able to continue their research after graduation, there will be a small post-degree research grant. And finally, bringing dependents to the US is strongly discouraged. This is a USAID policy, not a BHEARD policy. While this has been subject of some questions in the past, it's very clear that USAID has this policy, and that bringing dependents to the US is strongly discouraged. The advising arrangements are a little different in the BHEARD program than they are for graduate students that come from the US. First, there is a US advisor who is overall responsible for the graduate program. But we also have an in-country advisor. The in-country advisor must be chosen early in the proposal development process in consultation with the student, the US advisor, and home institutions. The participants, the in-country advisor participates in development of the proposal with the US mentor and student. And this is very important because that way the in-country advisor can help make sure that the proposal is relevant and doable in-country. The in-country advisor may be a member of the thesis committee. The in-country advisor provides country context for the research and facilitate the research at the home institution. Now, the US advisor has the overall responsibility for the student's graduate program. After all, the degree is given by the US institution. So the US advisor must make sure that required courses are taken. Students should take full number of credits per semester that is allowed under the graduate assistantship, and the student needs prior approval for additional credits. The US advisor is responsible for making sure that there is a graduate committee that is selected to support the student. It's important for the US advisor to help dissertation research, project development, of course, not only in the normal way that advisors would do so, but also to make sure that the research is relevant to feed the future objectives of the US government and USAID. The Feed the Future objectives are relatively broad, and so it is not that difficult to do, but we do need to keep this in mind. The research project must be approved, of course, by the graduate school, the committee, the institutional review board of the institution, but also by the in-country advisor, by the BHEARD project, and the USAID mission in the home country. And this, again, is to make sure that the research is relevant to Feed the Future objectives, is relevant to the institution, and doable within the country. The US advisor must also make sure that all graduate school requirements are met, just like for any other graduate student. There are also some shared responsibilities with students, namely for development of an individual development plan, and we'll talk about that in some more detail. Shared responsibility with the student for timeline and budget constraints, and shared responsibility with students for communicating effectively with the in-country advisor. This is slightly more complicated than without an in-country advisor, of course, but effective communication with this in-country advisor is important for the program. In some cases, the research funding that's provided through BHEARD, namely $5,000 for a PhD program, is sufficient for the research that's needed, is being conducted, but in other cases we recognize that it isn't. And so the US advisor is responsible for seeking additional research funding when necessary. This is a general program outline for a PhD program. As I mentioned before, the PhD program is supposed to last 4 years, and on this slide you can see years 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each year has 2 semesters, a fall and a spring semester. So in year 1, there is semester 1 and 2, and then the summer semester. In year 2, there is semester 3 and 4, and then summer semester In year 3, there is semester 5 and 6 in summer semester. And finally, in year 4, semester 7 and 8 in a summer semester. The general design of the program is that students are in the US during the first 3 years. And during that time, a lot of work goes on, of course, coursework and graduate committee selection, proposal development, and review by BHEARD and the other entities that I mentioned. Literature review, preliminary research, and method development is also taking place. So while in the first 3 years the students does primarily coursework, there is also a lot of other things going on, including research. Preliminary research that results in method development, proof of concept research, many projects that can help the research in country that takes place in year 4. Usually in the summer of year 2, the student returns home for a pre-dissertation trip to plan the research at home and to make sure that everything is lined up for research in year 4. And then in year 4, the student returns home to do their research in country. And during this time, the U.S. advisor usually takes a trip to the country, again, to help the student with their research, but also to create linkages between the institution in country and the U.S. institution. And then finally, there is thesis completion and video defense in country at the end of year 4. But a research proposal development needs some more discussion here. First, the research needs to be done in country. There is some discussion on that in the past, and people sometimes say, well, it's easier to do the research in the US. We have terrific equipment here, and why not do it here? Well, the reason we don't allow research to be conducted, or at least the bulk of the research to be conducted in the US, is that we want to make sure that the research is doable in country and is relevant to the country. So the research project must meet Feed the Future and BHEARD objectives. Both advisors help develop and approve the proposal. Again, the research must be doable in country. And if possible, the research should be integrated with research that is already existing in country. In some cases, there is already terrific research going on in country, and to integrate with those projects really helps the PhD research of our BHEARD scholars. BHEARD, as I mentioned, gives dissertation seed research funding of about $5,000, but in some cases this is insufficient, and the BHEARD scholar and their advisor need to seek extramural funding if needed for the proposed research. BHEARD likes to approve the research proposal before, of course, it's implemented, and so the BHEARD Management Office approves proposals and budgets. We're looking for a 3 to 4 page proposal, so not a lot of detail, but a general outline of what needs to be done. It should include a timeline for completion and a budget. And the approval process must be completed before the student returns home to conduct the research. And finally, of course, the U.S. advisor ensures that the proposal is approved at the U.S. institution, which that's where the degree is granted. Now, as I mentioned earlier, BHEARD scholars are likely to take leadership positions in their country. They'll probably lead institutions, maybe even their country. And so professional training for BHEARD scholars, in addition to the technical training, is very important. U.S. institutions that our BHEARD scholars are placed have professional training opportunities for graduate students. Many U.S. institutions really have terrific professional training opportunities for our students, and we want to make sure that students make use of these opportunities. To make sure that this happens, we would like the students to write an individual development plan. An individual development plan is now required by NSF and strongly recommended by NIH, and will help ensure that BHEARD scholars make use of these opportunities. Here are some examples of subjects that might be in an individual development plan. From a research perspective, students benefit from learning how to search for funding for their research and scholarships, developing grant writing skills, cross-disciplinary awareness, collaboration for research, scholarship, and publication. All of those are subjects that fall under the broad umbrella of research. Under leadership and responsibility, responsible conduct of research and scholarship is something that most universities require training in. Confidentiality and peer review process, responsible collaboration and mentoring, inclusiveness and diversity, personnel and project management skills, and leadership in the discipline are all areas where training might take place. Some scholars benefit from training in time management, identifying career goals and options, negotiation and conflict resolution are all opportunities for personal development. And finally, many of our scholars will be teaching, and so learning more about teaching and mentoring students and how people learn are other subjects for personal development training. To learn more about individual development plans, I have a couple links here. Particularly the link at the bottom of this slide is a good place to start. But a good individual development plan has the goal to integrate for individuals a personalized curriculum of professional development with a plan for disciplinary training. In the end, we want to prepare the individual who is ready to meet the demands of a research position, and so that are the objectives of an individual development plan. We now have some experience with BHEARD scholars and this program, and so here are some tips for early successes. Develop an individual development plan early, so that early on you can start making use of opportunities for training. People from different cultures have different expectations for sort of professional as well as technical development. And so set expectations for class attendance, lab meetings, professional development, so on, early so that everybody understands the expectations. Selecting a graduate committee as soon as possible is also important because while of course, the major advisor is the principal mentor, a graduate committee can also be very helpful. Lay out an entire coursework plan, also very important, so that at the end of the 3-year program in the US, all the coursework that is needed will have been taken. Begin research proposal development as soon as possible. Sometimes it takes a little longer for some scholars than for others, and so beginning the process soon and early in the process is really important so that in the end the scholar has a well thought through research proposal. Choose and effectively communicate with an in-country advisor is very important. The in-country advisor can be very helpful to the student, and so choosing a good one and effectively communicate is very important. We will be sure to carefully monitor academic progress. In fact, the BHEARD office will require student reports and grades after each academic term to make sure that the student makes the progress that we all expect. And then effective communication with the BHEARD office. The BHEARD office is there to help and has a great deal of experience with all kinds of issues that BHEARD scholars face. And so if you have any issue, make sure that you effectively communicate with the office. We have a new student database system that we're proud of. We're implemented an online student database system that will allow us to track, interact, and collect data and information from new applicants and current BHEARD scholars. We have a number of features for this program, including the ability of students or staff to upload required monitoring and evaluation documents, such as students' reflections and transcripts, student travel request forms to streamline travel processes, and overall improve communication between the BHEARD office and the student. And we think that this program will be fully functional by October of this year. So with that, I would like you to tell us how the BHEARD program can be improved, and we'll do that through asking you to click on the link in green on the slide here that will allow you to do and complete a SurveyMonkey survey. Next, we would like to go to the chat box and see if you have any questions, and we will answer each of those questions that we see in the chat box. Thank you for participating in this webinar, and the BHEARD office and I wish you a very successful first or current semester here in the US, and terrific success with your program. Thank you for your participation.